Hey, this is Anthony Davis with Shapeshift Wellness, and today we're going to explore the question, can yoga develop strength? So can you actually build strength with a yoga practice? So there's a lot of people, myself included, who are really pushing for a yoga practice that incorporates more strong types of activities. However, I want this episode to clarify that because it is a misnomer, because of the definition of the word strength when it comes to exercise science, yoga cannot actually build strength in the true sense of the word. We're going to find out why in today's episode, and I'm going to explore why that actually matters. This is not just a question of semantics. This is a question of long-term health and longevity. Hey, this is Shapeshift Wellness, the channel that uses research, evidence, and logical thinking to explore fitness, wellness, meditation, and all of those things. If you like to put your thinking cap on and understand the how and the why behind what you do in the gym or in a yoga studio or on a meditation cushion or whatever you enjoy doing, then please subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video with your friends, and always check out my website. I have free resources and classes on more in-depth subject matter. Now let's check out strength and yoga in today's episode. So let's start with definitions. So first we have strength. So strength is the ability of a muscle to exert force. I should say maximal force. So it is the maximum amount of force that your muscle in a given area. So if I'm saying bicep strength, then it's the maximum amount of force that your biceps muscle can exert without tearing, really, is what we're after. So in a practical real world example, because I know a lot of you are out there lifting boulders, how big of a boulder can you lift? Okay, oh my God, there was a terrible accident and a boulder fell on top of your neighbor and your neighbor is pinned under a boulder. How big of a boulder can you lift to save your neighbor? That's strength. Okay, now endurance is what most people mean in the yoga world when they say strength. So when they say, I need to work, I need you to work on your core strength, or I need you to work on your strength, your leg strength, your hip strength in a lunge or in a plank position or in your chaturanga, most of the time, really what they're after is endurance. So endurance is the ability of a muscle to continue to perform without fatigue. So it is more of a question of time under tension. How much time can you hold this boulder up to save your neighbor? Well, if you need to save your neighbor, really what you need is strength, not endurance. All you need to do is get that boulder up for just a split second, and then your neighbor can get their leg out from underneath the boulder. But endurance would be, okay, you've got a smaller boulder that you could easily lift, but you need to lift it up and you need to hold it for like a minute or 2 minutes while somebody comes in and unpins, or maybe your neighbor is tied as well. So there's some kind of trees that kind of like wrapped around their leg, and they're kind of strapped there, and they can't get out. So you get the boulder off. The boulder was kind of difficult to lift, but easy enough. But you're sitting there holding the boulder while somebody else comes in and tries to like trim these branches or cords or something that's wrapped around their legs. So you're sitting there holding the boulder. That's endurance, because you got to hold that boulder for like 1 minute. Oh, and you're like, come on, hurry up with the thing already so I can put this thing down. I don't know why you're not setting the boulder like behind you in this example. Just bear with me here. I'm trying to help you with analogies. The point is they're different. They're totally different measures of muscular capacity. All right. And so why does this actually matter? Who cares? Well, the way that I like to think about it is strength is more about tissue resilience. So how much of a impact can your body take without breaking, essentially, right? So if you fall, just on the floor, are you going to break your wrist, right? Are your muscles going to get torn if you try to catch your fall? That's strength. You need strength in order to do that. You don't need endurance to be able to catch yourself in a fall. It's a single event, okay? Versus endurance is more about cardiovascular fitness, about how long you can deal with chronic, easy things that you could manage if it was just one time. But if you have to do it all freaking day, that's endurance. So if your job involves lifting, if you're a Amazon warehouse, staff, and you're constantly getting boxes and putting them overhead and taking them down, putting them overhead, taking them down, these boxes might weigh only 20 pounds or something like that, or even less. And so it would be easy if you had to do it once. You have way more than enough strength to take the boxes off the shelf and put them up and put them down and put them up and put her down. But the fact that you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again, you need a ton of endurance. You don't need strength, you need tons of endurance. Totally different things. By the way, when I say think tissue resilience for strength and I say think cardiovascular for endurance, that is a real simplification. That is an oversimplification, because both strength and endurance do help with both resilience and cardio. I'm just trying to make things like big picture here. Big picture is that strength and endurance do have unique physiological benefits, okay? And you need to do both separately. They're different. Now, here's another example, 2 injury types. There are basically 2 ways that you can get an injury, okay? One way is acute, which means that there's one big boom, okay? In one instant, you know the moment that you were injured because you did something like rolled your ankle or you fell off of your roof or something like that. And you know the moment that you broke that bone, right? Because it was so much force, and then your body just couldn't handle that much force. So how do you prevent an acute injury? Well, one really effective way of preventing or reducing the severity or reducing the risk of acute injuries is to build strength, tissue resilience, strength training. And that traditionally is done by weightlifting, okay? Picking up heavy things. Then the other type of injury here is chronic. So chronic injuries are more like what we call a sub-maximal load, where you don't have a period of recovery. So if you have to pick up boxes and put them down, put them up, put them down, put them up, put them down, and you only have to do that 1 day a week, you're not going to get an injury from that because you have plenty of time. You have 6 days of recovery for your shoulders. So you can easily recover, you're going to be fine. But if you work 6 days a week doing the same thing every day, up and down, up and down, up and down, you don't have any time for your tissues to actually heal and recover. So that's a chronic injury because you have sub-maximal. So it's an easy load. You can easily pick up the box, but you do it all the time and you don't give yourself recovery time. So look at this slide here. Acute is strength. This is strength. This, preventing or reducing the severity of chronic injuries, is endurance. Okay, this is why we need to know the difference. So let's get back to more practical examples here. Strength, can you pick the kid up? Can you pick up the kiddo and put them over your back? Yeah, then you have the strength to do the task. But how long can you actually keep that kiddo up on your shoulders? And that is endurance. So you must have the strength to perform a task first before you can develop endurance to do it over and over again for longer durations. So you first must have the strength, and then you can develop endurance within that range of motion or within that activity. Okay, so in yoga, for example, if you don't have the strength to even hold a plank at all, to even get in the position on your hands and your feet to even get into a plank, then there's no way you can hold a plank and have endurance. So in that sense, yoga, if you start from a place where you can't even get on your hands and your feet at all because your muscles are too weak, then yes, you will be able to develop strength to get to that baseline of, okay, I can at least get into the plank position. But as long as you can hold that position for even like 5 or 10 seconds, then anything beyond that, and there's not an exact number, but as you start to say, oh, now we're like really counting the seconds here and we're trying to see how long you can hold it, that's all endurance. You're not gaining more strength because you can hold the pose for a minute or 2 minutes. That's amazing and good for you, and that's going to be good for your body, but it's not strength, it's endurance. So again, you must have the strength to perform the task before you can develop the endurance to do it over and over again for longer durations. Now, in another way of saying that though, or another way of looking at that, is that you'll never have endurance at the weight of your maximal strength. Does that make sense? Because if you're picking up the boulder and it's the heaviest boulder you could possibly lift, if it really is your maximum effort, you will only be able to hold that for a couple seconds while your neighbor gets their leg out from under the boulder, right? And if you can hold it for longer, then it's not a strength activity, it's an endurance activity. But if you can only hold it for a second, it's a strength activity, okay? So as soon as you can, you develop the endurance to hold it for longer, you're no longer working on strength, gotcha? So how do you test these things? How do you actually see, well, is this a strength thing or is this an endurance thing? Well, traditionally, if we want to test a person's strength, we have them do a 1 repetition maximum lift. So they literally would pick up the heaviest possible object that they could. Now, that's kind of risky, okay? So we generally in strength and conditioning and in exercise science don't recommend that you actually do 1 rep maxes. There's really not a lot of benefit to doing it, and we can usually estimate your 1 rep max by doing a 5 rep max or a 10 rep max instead. So what is the maximum amount of weight that you could pick up 10 times? And then we do a little, it's a calculation, and you estimate then how much your 1 rep max would be. How big of a boulder can you lift? And then for endurance, traditionally, we'll do holds or maximum, a number of squats, for example, in a minute. But as it pertains to yoga, we might think about holds. So in this side bridging activity here, or side plank activity, we might say, well, we know you can get into the position. That's not a problem. You have more than enough strength to get into the position. But then how much endurance you have, and we would test that by saying, okay, get into the position and start your stopwatch, and just how long can you hold it? And when your muscles give out and you literally cannot hold it anymore because your muscles are failing, you stop the stopwatch, okay? These are hard tests, we don't need to do these things for exercise, but this is how you would actually test it. And there are lots of other ways to test it, by the way. This is not the only way. So can you train strength with body weight exercise? Well, we address this. If you start from a place of having very little strength at all, then yeah, of course the body weight exercises are the place you need to start. But that's the beginning of your journey, not the end of the journey. Now, some people are out there and they're thinking in their head, okay, but what about planches and handstands and 1-arm push-ups and all these pistol squats and all these different ways that you can make body weight exercise incredibly hard. So yeah, totally fair. But let's look at why I don't think that's a good idea. You're right, you can theoretically build a tremendous amount of strength with just body weight exercise, but here's why I don't think that's a good idea. So, or at least it's not practical. It's just not practical for most people. Okay, if you're highly advanced and you want to put the time into it and you're really dedicated, yes, you can develop a lot of strength with body weight exercise. Probably as much strength as you theoretically need as a human being. But I just think there's a better way to do it, and lifting up heavy things is just easier, frankly. So here are the problems I have with body weight exercise for the purpose of building strength, if that was your only goal. Well, progression is really hard to load incrementally. So what we want to see in developing strength is that, week 1 over here, you're adding you're lifting, let's say you're doing a deadlift and you're lifting just the bar, 45 pounds. Well, 2 weeks later, we might say, okay, let's try again here. And now you're lifting 55 pounds. Okay. And then you're doing that. And then 2 weeks later, it's getting easy. You're having you're having an easier time lifting 55 pounds. Then here's 65. And then, a month later, you're lifting, let's say 95. And then, another month later, you're lifting 115 pounds. So we can very clearly, incrementally measure and track your progress. And it's very systematic and it's very efficient to do it that way. There's no guesswork. We know how much weight is on the bar and we know how hard or easy it is for you doing the exercise. You can't really do that with body weight. Very hard to do that with body weight. The next problem I have is that progressions rely on balance and stability, which distracts from pure strength. So if, for example, you are trying to do a pistol squat, which is basically you're doing a squat, but you're doing it on one leg, very hard, requires a lot of strength. I would agree with that, but it also requires so much balance and stability that if you were to, for example, let's put it this way, in the middle of the room with no support, if you were to do as many pistol squats as you could, let's just assume you can even do a pistol squat, because yes, it does require strength to do it. But in the middle of the room, let's say you could do 5 pistol squats on the right leg. Well, if you then went over to the wall and placed your hand and held onto a bar on the wall, like think you're in a bar class, you hold onto the bar in a bar class on the wall. Now you have taken away some of the need for stability. Now, if you did the same test on another day, holding onto the wall, instead of doing 5 as your maximum amount, you might be able to do 8 maximally, because you have less stability, so you're fatiguing less, right? Because you can really focus purely on strength. So a lot of times the bodyweight exercises, the harder the bodyweight exercise gets, I tend to notice that most of them rely on a lot of balance and control. And if you're focused on balance, you cannot produce maximal force production, which is strength. So it distracts from it. The last problem that I think I see in bodyweight is eventually you will plateau. No matter how clever you get with your bodyweight exercises, eventually you're going to hit a point where that exercise becomes easy or easier. And it's just, you're going to need to pick up a heavy thing. Okay, there's lots of ways to do it. You could pick up weights, you could use resistance bands, cable machines, lots of medicine balls, whatever, but you need resistance eventually. So let's take an example. Let's look at push-ups. And if we look at a push-up, you might say, this is only one way. This is just one way of progressing a push-up. There are lots of ways of doing it. This is just one way. So you have a person, they start by just kind of leaning against a wall. So this is step 1. They lean against the wall and they kind of do little push-ups. This is not going to be a lot of effort for most people. Then you change the angle here. So this angle is steeper, it's going to be harder. And then you get a chair, and now this angle is even steeper. And then eventually you get on the floor, and then you're doing it steeper. And by the way, in here you could put your knees down as well, and that might be easier. So you can progress there. Okay, that's incremental. Great. So eventually we get to this push-up. So you're doing a full push-up eventually. Where do you go from there? That's not a lot of weight, really, if you think about it. If you look at weightlifting, like you should be able to bench press your body weight, give or take. So how do you make that harder? Well, okay, so you get rid of one of the arms. You do a one-armed push-up. Well, where are the steps between a two-armed push-up and a one-armed push-up? Now you're dealing with basically twice as much weight in one arm. That's a huge jump. That's not incremental. So what do you do? Well, I guess you could say, okay, so now you're at the one arm phase and you go all the way back here to the first step and you go on the wall and you do wall one arm push-ups, and then you make your way through the same progression, but with one arm. You could do that. That would be a systematic, incremental way of doing it. The problems I already discussed is here. One, is that this is a lot to keep track of, and most people are simply, this is just going to be too hard for them to do this, and it's not practical. It's really easy to just put a little more weight on the bar or take a little bit of weight off the bar, and just that's easy. This is harder to keep track of, and this is going to prevent people from doing the exercise in the first place, or they're going to go all over the place and they're not going to be able to remember how to keep track and take it systematically. And the second one is, eventually you will get to this stage here with one arm. You'll get to one arm push-ups. And then what? And then it's another huge leap. Like, I guess you're doing decline, but that's a different muscle group. You get what I'm saying. It's just messy and impractical for most people. Okay. If you just hate picking up weight, you can get clever, but I just think it's, there's an easier way to go about it. So again, right here with weights, it's just easy to track and measure progress. You start with one, you add a little bit here, you add a bit here, you add a bit here. Oh, then it's, you get stress in your life and you have to go back to another step. So you go back, and then you go forward, 2 steps back, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you can make incremental progress. Now, yoga, on the other hand, is really good at establishing a baseline of modest strength. Then building endurance. So once you get to the point where you can basically do all of the typical yoga poses, you're no longer building strength, you're building endurance. And that's great. And that is a really good thing. And you should keep doing it. And if you love yoga and you hate picking up weights, go do all the yoga. Don't worry about it. This is about education, right? So the reason this is important, again, strength and endurance are different things, just like carbs and fats are different things, right? Carbs and fats are not good or bad. They're both good, they're both bad, they're both, whatever. It totally depends on context. But you need to know that a carb is a different thing than a fat. Okay, they're both necessary, but you can't just eat carbs or just eat avocados all day and expect to be healthy. You need a balanced diet. And in the same way, you need a balanced physical activity program. Some people even hate the word program. Anyway, so the whole point here is just the more you know. This is me saying carbs are different than fats. What you do with that information is up to you. If you want to pick up weights now, great. I just want to dispel the myth that yoga is a complete physical activity program in and of itself. It's self-contained, and it is not. There are so many things that yoga offers that are great, and there are so many great things that yoga doesn't offer. And it's important for you to know that. Now, if you don't go out and pick up weights, are you an unhealthy person? No, not at all. But if you did go pick up weights in addition to doing your yoga practice, would that be beneficial for you? Yes, definitely. So I would encourage you to consider supplementing if you're just a yoga person. Consider supplementing your yoga maybe with some resistance bands types of things, or picking up weights, or just explore your options. The more you know. So I really appreciate you watching. Please leave your comments below, like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode.